Hello, 7th graders. Today we are looking into solving simple percent problems. This belongs to Common Core Standard 7 RPA3. Use proportional relationships to solve multi-step ratio and percent problems. You are throwing a basketball 100 times and you score 50 times. In how many different ways can you write 50% success ratio as a fraction? Hint, use equivalent fractions. Pause the video and write 2, 3 or more equivalent fractions to show 50%. Okay, what percent means per 100 or out of 100? For example, if you throw a basketball 100 times and you score 50 times, then we say you scored 50 out of 100 times, or 50% of the time. 50% is the ratio 50 out of 100, or 50 over 100. But what does 50% of the time mean if you throw a basketball 468 times, or only 18 times? In each of the two scenarios, you need to scale the 50 to 100 ratio. Namely, you need to scale it up to 234 to 468 ratio, or you need to scale it down to 9 to 18 ratio. 50% can be written as a fraction 50 out of 100, or any fraction in its equivalent form, such as 234 over 468, or 9 over 18, or 1 over half. There are many ways to write 50% as a ratio using equivalent fractions. Learning objective. I can solve simple percent problems in two equivalent ways, using a proportion and using an equation. We will look at percents as ratios part to whole. Percent equals part to whole. We will also show an equivalent way to percent equals part to whole to solve percent problems as equations. We will use visual representation. We can represent 50 to 100 ratio, or 50%, by shading half of the whole. 1 to 2 is also equivalent to 50 out of 100. Although both shaded parts are equal, the wholes can be different. When the whole is 468, the part that corresponds to 50% is half of that, 234. Similarly, when the whole is 18, part at 50% is 9. Our visual model acts as a double number line. At the bottom, we track percentages from 0 to 100. At the top, we track quantities from 0 to whatever the whole is, in this case 468 or 18. 50% is our part. In this case, it's right in the middle, which means that part as a quantity is also going to be right in the middle. The whole rectangle presents the whole, and the shaded part represents the part. Each of these equivalent ratios that we talked about so far, for 50%, 50 over 100, 234 over 468, 9 over 18, 1 over half, or any other equivalent fraction, presents a different multiplicative comparison between a part and a whole. What all these have in common is that each of these fractions is 50%. These are all equivalent ratios. These are all equivalent fractions. When solving percents problem, your part to whole ratio needs to be equivalent to the same fraction. 50% is 50 over 100 equals part over whole. We will use the idea that percent equals part over whole to solve our percents problem as proportion. To set up proportion, we start from percent, for example, 50% equals 50 over 100, which is equal, for example, in our case, 9 over 18. Remember, part over whole is the same as our percent. 50% is 9 over 18, or 50 out of 100. We can also think about another way to show percent equals part over whole. If you multiply both sides by whole, then whole and whole will cancel. So let's say we multiply right side by whatever the value whole is, in this case 18, multiply on both sides. Whole and whole cancel, and we are left with whole times percent equals part. Switch sides left and right, and you have part equals percent times whole. This form we use to solve percent problems as an equation. In our case, part is 9, percent is 50, and whole is 18. Our equation becomes 9 equals 0.5, this is a point, 0.5 times 18. Okay, let's see how this works on examples. There are 3 types of problems that we will look into: part unknown, whole unknown, or percent unknown. Let's look at the first one. Part unknown. What is 15% of 75? 15, well, 15%, 15% of 75 is, and now we're going to find out. Looking at this example, we can decide what is part, what is whole, what is percent. We know percent is 15. We are looking for 15% of 75. Therefore, our whole is 75. And the part is unknown. 15% is about here. Our part, the quantity, is also there. So if we shade this, we are showing the part that is 15% of the whole, which is 75. Now let's think about how we can solve this. We will start from representing 15%, which is given as 15 out of 100. To create an equivalent ratio, we'll look at part and the whole. Part is x, whole is 75. To solve this, we solve it as any proportion. We'll look for the number that needs to multiply. This is times. Okay, I'll just put a dot for times. Okay, this is times. 15 times what equals x. 100 times what equals 75. This is a scenario of a missing factor. 100 times something equals 75. Missing factor is found as the quotient 75 divided by the known factor. So let's review. Missing factor is 75 out of 100, which is the quotient 75 divided by the known factor 100. There's another easy way we can go from 100 to 75. If we go through 100 divided by 100 is 1. So 100 divided by 100 is 1. Then times 75 gets me to 75. 100 divided by 100 is 1. 1 times 75 is 75. Now in proportion, fractions need to be equivalent. So whatever I did to my denominator, I have to follow up and do it to the numerator. If I knew the missing factor as a quotient divided by the known factor, 75 over 100, I can find my x that way. If you choose to go through 1 in the denominator, you have to do the same to the top. So divide by 100 times 75. I'm showing you two different ways. You can choose one or the other, or you can solve in another way. For example, you cross multiply, which is also called butterfly method. But whatever method you choose, your x will look like this. 15 divided by 100 times 75. Where did this come from? I apply divide by 100 times 75 to 15 to find x. X is 15 divided by 100 times 75. This looks very similar to missing factor. 15 times 75 divided by 100 equals x. Now we'll use a calculator and find that 15 times 75 divided by 100 equals 11.25. I just found the part. I can answer my question. 15% of 75 is 11.25. In 7th grade, proportion is common core way. I also want to teach you an easy way, which most of adults use, solving percent problem as an equation. And you might see this in some books. So let's review. Part is a percent times whole. Just like 50%, just like 9 was equal 50% times 18, we can use the same template and look for what part is 15% of 75. Okay. X equals, I can rewrite 15% as 15 over 100 or as 0.15. 15 over 100 is 1/10 and 5/100. And then I multiply that by 75. And this, when you type in the calculator, also equals 11.25. In two different ways, I found that my part is 11.25. This is an example of an unknown part. What if the whole is unknown? Let's look at example 13 is 17% of what? 13 is 17% of something, and we are going to find that. So what do we know? We know that 13 is the part, it's the 17%. So we know 17% is 13, but we don't know what our whole is. On our visual, we can shade 17% as a little bit less than a fifth. Fifth would be 20%. So 17% is a little less than 20%. And that's 13 as a quantity. Now, how do we solve this as a proportion? Percent, it's color coded, it's green. 17% is 17 out of 100. Now my equivalent fraction is part over whole. Oops, this should be x. Okay, now how do I solve that? You can multiply by unknown factor, which is quotient, over known factor. Or, if easier, you can go through 1. 17 divided by 17 is 1 times, I'll write times as a dot, times 13 equals 13. In proportion is equivalence of ratios, which are fractions. In order to maintain equivalence of fractions, whatever I did to my numerator, I have to do to my denominator. So either I am multiplying by the missing factor, which is quotient over known factor, or I am dividing by 17 and multiplying by 13, because that's what I did to my numerator. In either case, my x is 100 I'm going to divide that by 17. This is 7. And I'm going to multiply that by 13. Okay. 100 times 13 divided by 17. Plug in the calculator. 100 times 13 divided by 17 equals 76.47. 76.47, and that is rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, as an equation, part, do I know the part? 13 is 17% of what? Okay, we can rewrite this as 13 equals 0.17 x. To solve this as an equation, I will divide both sides by 0.17 in order to isolate x. As a result, I plug in the calculator 13 divided by 0.17 and I get the same answer, 76.46 rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, to answer my question, 13 is 70% of 76.46. Okay, last type of problems before we practice on your own. What percent of 280 is 56? This is a case when percent is unknown. What percent of 280 is 56? So we'll say, what percent of 280 is 56. At any time, you can pause the video and try on your own. Okay, what percent of 280 is 56? Apparently, they're looking for percent. They're telling me that the whole is 280 and then my part is 56. Okay, I have no idea where to put percent line, but I know that it's about a quarter. Because when I compare 56 and 280, it's about a quarter. So my part is somewhere around the first quarter. And I have to figure out exactly what percent that is. Okay, so my percent is unknown. I don't know what it is. Part is 56 and the whole is 280. This is 280. Okay, how do I solve it? To go from 100 to 280, I can multiply by 2.8, which is 280 divided by 100. This pencil is not cooperating right now. So 100 times 2.8 is 2.80, or just simply divide by 100, multiply, this is 100, multiply by 280, and that gets you from 100 to 280 if you're going through 1. 100 divided by 100 is 1. 100 to 180 is 280. What I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. X equals, actually X divided by 100 times 280 equals 56. To solve this, I can multiply by a reciprocal. X times 280 divided by 100. Notice how I'm fluently moving fraction line wherever I want to. So I can create an equivalent fraction. I can create a reciprocal to multiply both sides. Sorry. 56 times 100 over 280. Okay. Reciprocals cancel. They are equal to 1. So x times 1, or just x, equals, I take my calculator, I plug in 56 times 100 divided by 280, and I get 20. X is 20%. So 20% of 280 is 56. And let's just quickly look at solving this as an equation. 56 equals x percent times 280. We want to divide both sides by 280 in order to isolate x. On the right side we have x, on the left side we have 56 over 280. 56 divided by 280 is 0.2. Now we need to represent x as a fraction. 0.2 is 2 tenths and 0 hundredths, and that is equal to 20%. Same answer. Okay. Your turn. Here are 9 problems. Left column is unknown part, middle column unknown whole, and last column unknown percent. Pause the video, try all 9, and when you're ready, you can go to the next slide and check your answers. Good luck and thank you for watching.